Welcome to How Can Finance Earn a Seat at the Strategic Leadership Table. This message is primarily focused to the CFO who wants to be more than just an influencer, more than just a trusted advisor, but really someone who is a leader within the company, who has a peer role directly supporting the focus of the business. And this direction will help you become further enhanced in your ability to move even beyond the CFO role. Because we're going to teach you how to think as a CEO thinks. And whether you want to go into a CEO role later or to a COO role or some other roles, you are in a very unique position to do that. When you look around with many of my friends, many of them in the CEO suite and other areas have a finance background. And so you understand the language of business, you understand how all the pieces fit together. It is a huge opportunity for you. For those who are not yet at the CFO level, the things we're going to talk about today will begin to give you that insight how you can help your CFO to be more successful, and by doing so, learn how you can eventually move up into the CFO role. So let's get started. The first thing to focus on this is a formula that I call the secret formula. It ties to a course I teach called Revolutionizing Your Personal Competitive Edge. So when you look at results, most people in finance understand that and they know how to measure it. And we're going to talk about the CEO focus on results. We don't have time to talk about relationships. Most people in finance are weak in relationships. So by focusing on learning how to develop relationships in addition to the results will ultimately lead you to greater success. And why is that important? Because the higher you go, the more you have to influence other people not under your direct control. The more you have to exhibit leadership among those who you do not have direct control over. And frankly, even if you're a CEO, you still have to learn to lead broader people in different functions. And so that is why relationships are so important. And many of the recommendations we're going to make here will require the leadership to do that, to make it happen, because we're going to talk about more than just pure finance. And we'll discuss management versus leadership roles later. So let's start off with the simple question of who sits at the biggest table, the most strategic table in the company. And we all know the answer is the CEO and the board. No surprise there. But what is their focus? And this may surprise you. It's revenue, profit, and competitiveness. It's not on all the support functions of the company. Those functions are there to help support the revenue, profit, and competitiveness of the company. So how do they get there? Well, you probably have been in meetings where this has happened. They are focusing on measurable strategic business initiatives. So what we're talking about is those 3 to 5 major initiatives that the CEO and board use to help the company move forward to be more competitive, to grow more revenue, and to create more profit. And in doing so, it's not just current year focused. It's not just the fire drills, the closing of the books, all the things that most operational people look at every day. This is looking at strategically a much further horizon. And so what are those initiatives? Limited usually to 3 to 5. Why? Because if you do more than that, you're not really focused. And you have too many people doing too many things, and none of them usually get done well. So there are 4 major points here. First, it has to be measurable. Well, again, finance is usually the group who can help make sure that the progress reports and the impact to the company are measurable, particularly if it impacts the financial statements. And sometimes they need your help to measure things that are not as easy to understand in the way you have your general ledger hitting the financial statements. There may be some impacts that cover a number of different accounts and need your help to figure out what really is going on. And if you have to guess, just like actual-based costing, well, your best guess is better than other people's best guess. So you're very important in this role, even if it's not your initiative that you're driving and you're simply part of that team. Second, strategic. I've already identified 3 to 5+ years. Business. Business is something most people never define. And this is a huge issue. So what is the business? A CEO would say to you, it's 3 things. It's the product or service, marketing, and sales. Notice, finance, HR, IT, all the other functions are support functions to the core business. Why? Without a product and service, you don't have a business. You have nothing to sell. You may have the best product and service in the world with the highest quality, highest customer service and operations, but if you don't have the marketing to communicate to other people that you exist, you may be the greatest hidden secret in your industry. And because of that, if no one knows that you exist and you have the great products, they probably won't come seeking to buy your products. Or if your brand is not managed well, you have a negative brand in the market. Even more so, people won't trust you and your products and services. And of course, third, sales. There is usually some competition or some contention between sales and finance. One is control focused, one is whatever they can get away with focused. But there's a balance between the two. And so sales is required because if there is no sales, well, there's no money to pay the salaries and the business shuts down. So that is the core of the business. And as the CFO is thinking about broadening the horizon, the question is going to be, how can you help all 3 of those areas of business in addition to simply being in a support role in finance? And then finally, initiatives. What are the initiatives? Well, those are usually have a strategy, have a purpose, have a description, deliverables, and then managed just like a project management function. And so you would want to have milestones to keep the executives abreast of what's going on, updates if there's issues, make sure there's awareness of the issues, and you're able to report that throughout the year. In a strategic plan, there are a number of different initiatives that help strategically tie to the big picture. So your initiative may be 1 year, maybe more than 1 year, but it needs to tie to the bigger picture strategic plan of the company and approved by the CEO, which means you have the CEO's not only emotional but political backing. So the question then is, what measurable strategic business initiatives can finance drive? Now notice, finance should participate in almost all of them, but which ones should finance take the leadership on? Because that puts you squarely in the sights of the CEO responsible for your initiative, but it needs to tie to the strategic plan, which means that it may be in other functions, but someone needs to take the lead to control the entire project and be responsible for it. But the focus has to come back to the purpose of the company. How is it going to help me to increase revenue, profit, and competitiveness? We'll give you some examples in a few minutes. So, what does traditional finance do? You can read through these, and you know these better than me, and maybe a few others you can add. And the only one in here that usually is more than current year focused is the first one, strategic planning and forecasting, where you're looking at, again, multiple years. One CFO said to me, Jim, last year I did a client as a consulting engagement, a 25-year plan. China, as you know, has 100-year plans. The bigger the picture, the more strategic you see how you fit in and you can help the company move forward, particularly for revenue, profit, and competitiveness, is the more you'll be viewed at more than being a simple silo. And that's the point. So all of these beneath these are current year focused. They are finance operations, which is critical. If these aren't happening, you don't have time. for strategic. So these have to be functioning well. But I'm trying to make a differentiation between current year financial operations and strategic finance. So is traditional finance strategic? Well, let's take a look. Many finance functions are strategically important. They're critical, but they're not focused on more than the current year. Therefore, I would call them tactical. I would call strategic multiple year horizon focused. Very often, finance is the company's financial watchdog, as it should be. You're there to help prevent fraud, to make sure everything is compliant with all the regulations and with the SEC and Sarbanes-Oxley and GAAP and all the things that you have to be worried about every day. So that is a critical role. But is that current year or is that long term? It's long term that you do it every year. But what are you changing with the long term focus and helping grow the business? That's the difference. Compliance focused and risk avoidant. Because there's so much fiduciary responsibility and legal accountability, of course you're a compliance focus. That is a foundation of what you have to do. If that's not happening, again, you'll be put into fires, not having time to do what's really more important for the business, but you have to fix the issues of the business. That drives usually to what's called risk avoidance, which means you're not really willing to change or challenge anything what you're doing today in fear that it may not be compliant or that it may distract from what you're doing every day. You're going to see under management that is important. Under leadership, I'm going to challenge you. Focus on cost reduction. By the way, my background includes a lot of finance experience, including CFO of $250 million P&L. And focus on cost reduction is a major focus. And I've loved making opportunities to create a lot of savings for companies. In finance, we see it all over the place. We're going to challenge you more than just cost reduction. Here's why. Sometimes saving $1 means that we're actually eliminating that dollar that is invested with an ROI producing 400% or $4. We have to make sure in our function of cost savings, we're not so tactically focused that we're missing the bigger picture of investment. That is what the CEO is looking at. Investment usually means there is an opportunity, and every opportunity is competing to be heard and selected. Most don't get selected. Why? Because you only have so much money and risk tolerance for certain number of opportunities. Every opportunity has a risk factor tied to it and a cost factor tied to it. So I define that opportunity and that decision as an investment decision. And when you look at the opportunity, the investment, the expected ROI, the risk of that ROI not occurring, or the risk in other areas like compliance, and the cost of that investment, you look at all those factors, you'll be making much wiser decisions. I call them prudent decisions. And again, finance has a major role in helping the CEO make those decisions. Focus on traditional best practices. Since there's so much compliance focused, the traditional best practices very often are kept year after year after year. There's one company that we acquired, and we found their culture was people in finance sat in a cubicle, the same cubicle, for 20 years. They didn't know what the product or the paperwork was that came to them. They didn't know what happened to it before then. They didn't know what happened to it after they did their role in processing that paperwork. They were in a very narrow box. Very often that does happen in companies. The more cross-functional training that they get, the better they understand what's really going on, and the better they can identify areas of opportunity. areas of improvement, areas of cost savings. So the same is true with best practices. A lot of best practices may be good for that company, that industry, but may not be best practice for your company. In addition, what was best practice 10 years ago is not necessarily best practice today. Not only is the world changing, technology is changing, processes are changing, laws are changing. We constantly have to be reevaluating our policies and procedures to make sure we are doing the best and brightest. One of the functions I drove was worldwide, supporting 80 countries, and I had a rule where I had to write all the policies, procedures, or at least manage them, and initially write them because I recreated the whole function. And my rule was anybody in my organization worldwide could come up with a better idea that would change that policy and procedures from a business standpoint. Now, my role was to make sure, first, it was compliant, second, that it made good business sense, and third, that it was really better than what we're doing today. If it was, we would make the change. If there was an exception, like Brazil happened to be an exception, it was for a business reason, it made sense, and for Brazil, we had some exceptions. The question is, do you have best practices that are out of date? Scorekeepers for financial impacts. So when you're looking at what's going on, you are the official scorekeepers. But again, is that strategic? Well, really it's day-to-day focused. The close for the month, the close for the quarter, the annual close. Fiduciary representatives to shareholders. Same thing. You're focusing on making sure the books are accurate. You're following all the laws. Internal audit is making sure controls and governance is in place. And because of all this, most financial organizations, not all, most, are reactive to changes. Why? There's so much going on. Any change is difficult to manage, which is why strategic initiatives are important. And you can have an initiative within finance only that can be strategic as long as it ties into the company's multiple year strategic plan. But the challenge for finance is what is going on in the world you need to be kept abreast of, because it will impact the business that you can take control and lead in terms of making the change, making the CEO aware of it so that he or she approves of it, and you're the one who is bringing the company forward to becoming more competitive. So, is your finance organization demonstrating measurable results? In other words, what is the ROI and increasing value of finance to the company? You may have never thought of that before, but you should be able to measure an ROI and demonstrate the increasing value of your function and of your people. We'll describe that more later. Are you a cost center or a profit center? Most people look at finance as a cost center. If it's being managed in a business perspective, I would suggest to you it should be a profit center, not taking profits out of other functions so that you look like a hero and they don't have the money and resources to do their job. But there's so much money laying around in all the functions that you can take the lead and let the savings and credit flow through those functions, but you also take credit for the pro forma cost savings that you help to drive. And in some cases, they are absolutely driven to you. One example I'll give you later, which is in supply management. Are you proactively tied to the company long-term strategic plan? Well, here, hopefully, the answer should be yes. But in some cases, finance, even though they did the numbers for the financial plan, really don't understand product, marketing, and sales part of the plan and how they need to help contribute. So are you tied to the revenue, profit, and competitiveness objectives? How are you contributing value to those? Not that you own revenue, profit, and competitiveness, but what is your role in helping make it happen? And are you implementing cross-functional, measurable strategic business initiatives? The nice thing about this is if you're the leader of that project, that initiative, it's still going to require cross-functional work, which means you're going to have the visibility of the CEO and the board. So what does strategic finance do? First, to recognize that the day-to-day operations of current year tactical finance is not only tactical, but it's critical to keep it moving forward in the right way. And as long as you're doing that, it allows you as a CFO to focus on the value add strategic and driving everyone to learn how they also can help contribute to the business. But you have to understand that keep the business operating while you don't optimize the tactical until first you learn the company's business. Then you work with the CEO, or if you're lower in division, with the general manager, to design the financial strategy, controls, and metrics that support the business, and then are approved by the CEO and board, or in large companies by the general manager or division president. Then you create new concepts, new paradigms to maximize the reporting, controls, cost savings, and strategies in support of the business initiatives. So the challenge here is sometimes controls and cost savings can be harmful to the business initiative. You have to balance them out and make sure that you are not being an obstructionist to good things in the business where you don't have to be. Have to be means, of course, revenue recognition required. Prudent audit controls required. But there needs to be a balance and making sure that you're complying at the same time helping drive the business. Not just support it, but to help drive the business. And then you come back to your day-to-day operations, current year, with the strategies and the project plan to start tweaking and changing your functional requirements day to day that align with the business initiatives and multiple year business strategies. Company-wide, of course, with appropriate processes and controls. And then you can also have a unique opportunity to act as an internal consultant to all levels of management, that is your organization, because you have the ability to add tremendous value, particularly as we talk about a great opportunity coming up where the people need help and they need to understand how they can add ROI and value, and finance has a major opportunity to help them do that. And then you probably already know this, but in many companies, finance oversees other functions as needed. Sometimes it's because the CEO doesn't see that function working properly. They don't know where to put it. They don't have a home for it. They can't find someone from the outside to take care of it and drive it. So they love to tuck it underneath finance. And so many of us in finance have been given other jobs that are not core finance that we're asked to go fix, to manage day to day, and we may think that that's a negative. In reality, it is a huge positive because it's going to teach you more about the business and all the support functions and cross-functional functions, so your business acumen will skyrocket if you look at those other functions as an opportunity. The challenges to traditional finance are sales views finance as a sales inhibition department. You probably all heard that. And I've been there. I've supported sales in finance most of my career. And what we did in finance was we enabled sales while still controlling the loose cannons, putting the delegations of authority, the controls in place to make sure that we had that balance. And sometimes I would actually go out to a client site to help negotiate terms, because a lot of the things the client was asking for we probably could do, but at the same time, sales, we want to give it away. And it was always a negotiation. We would only do this for major accounts. Operations, IT, HR, marketing, sales all use finance for budgeting and reporting, but rarely do they allow finance to come in and change their process. HR says, no, this is our turf. A person, a CTO in IT said, Jim, you got to understand, we have built ourselves a castle, and we put a moat around it, and we've drawn up the draw gate, and we put alligators in the moat. This is our turf. And so they don't want finance to come in, which is why often finance will loan out a finance person to support IT, but they're in really the IT organization. Same thing with HR. But in those functions, some finance people allow that to happen without oversight, but most who have that oversight make sure that there's, say, dual reporting into finance and they actually monitor what's going on. Finance is typically savings reporting and cost controls focused, but rarely the innovation, customer satisfaction, revenue, and competitiveness driver. The reality is you see things a lot better than most from the big picture because you see all the numbers. But the balance is, how are you helping the business be more innovative while still having controls? Helping drive customer satisfaction because you understand the cost of customer dissatisfaction, the impact to revenue, impact to profit, and competitiveness. And so there is a major role, but traditionally finance is not known for being innovative or involved in the business. Other functions see finance as traffic cops, particularly with the money, and a wall of no. Cost-cutting enforcers, and merely a cost center. So many of them devalue finance. I mean, they call us bean counters, all kinds of names, because that helps them feel more superior. Finance is not superior to anybody, nor are they superior to finance. Running a company takes a team. But the challenge is sometimes finance is in a silo, and they allow that title to be earned because they don't understand the business. And sometimes they really are obstructionists to the business when they should be enablers to the business with fiduciary controls in place. Finance is viewed as a support function, not the strategic decision makers of the business. Again, I'm going to suggest to you that most strategic finance people wind up being general managers, CEOs, and other business executives because they understand and have learned how all the pieces fit. In which case the opportunity is there for finance. And when that happens, finance is less likely to be seen as strictly a support function. Finance is also often asked to oversee other functions, such as HR, IT, facilities, administration, the list goes on and on. In my case, supply management procurement was given to me. So it depends on what you're doing and where the problems are. The CEO usually trusts the head of finance and gives them more responsibility, which sometimes they reject. In my case, procurement supply management, the first year I was doing a startup, created a very new product line within the company with 2 other people. And we were the first computer company to come out with it. It was networking sales. And the president asked me to go fix procurement. And I said, I can't. I had 3 P&Ls I was responsible for financially, and one of them was a startup, which I had to change almost all the rules to fit the business model. I'll describe some of those later. So it's not always wanted, but when it came back the second year and made the same request, I did accept it, and then I was astonished how big the opportunity was. And that took off to be ultimately worldwide, very large opportunity. By owning financial oversight and controls, finance already has a seat at the leadership table. There's no question about that. But you may be viewed as the underling, the one who keeps track of the books, the bean counter, not part of the decision making. Or you may be viewed as a trusted advisor, somebody who they want to be part of the discussion because you have something to say that they perceive as value because you're learning the business and you're adding value. You also could be seen as someone who is the leader, decision maker de facto of an initiative, and on other initiatives as part of the team. So you're not involved as a business driver in product development, marketing, and sales, but you need to learn those and support those so that eventually you have a major say, and not just, again, as a trusted financial advisor, but as a trusted business advisor. So in my opinion, CFOs have the opportunity of becoming more than trusted advisors. Finance can impact every aspect of the business and earn an equal seat at that leadership table, except, of course, the role of the CEO. And if that's not happening, that's the challenge before you. Here's some examples. These are real examples that have occurred. Optimized treasury cost. We did a merger with two Fortune 500 companies, and my job was to integrate treasury on both. We reduced banking accounts by 80% and the cost of banking by 50%. That hit profit. Didn't really help revenue or competition. I did have to go to sales and make sure I wasn't harming sales, because many of our sales were to banks, and that was who I was talking to and potentially taking business away from. So we worked very closely with sales. Turned giveaway services into a $2 billion line of business. In the computer industry, we used to give away professional services to sell mainframes. So I was asked to go and create a profit center, a P&L, out of professional services as its own separate line of business. That later became 1/3 of the company. And longer term, after I left the company, it really became the company. We were the first computer company to do this. And that meant I had to get involved in HR, had to get involved in IT, a lot of other areas to drive what it took to make this happen. The result was we did impact revenue. We created over $2 billion of new revenue, which meant from a profit center, not only did we eliminate the giveaway lost business, lost cost, sunk cost, but also we brought in margin, huge impact to profit. And of course, competitiveness, we now had a broader business line to give a solution to a client, not just selling a product. I was later asked to go create networking as a separate business. First computer company to come out with that P&L. First year was only $500,000. And from there on, it grew rapidly. Again, I had to change most of the rules to fit the business. And I also had to get them approved by the CFO of the company, by internal audit and legal. And of course, the general manager understood what I was doing. So, and doing that, again, impacted revenue, profit, and competitiveness. One of the things I did to help them was we moved sales compensation, commissions, from being revenue-based to margin-based. This gave me much better controls on margin because most of our product were third-party products, and I only cared about that bottom line. So if a client was sensitive to a price on a product, we made it up elsewhere. It really didn't matter. We were very flexible. Reduced product cost. Product costs were high in one P&L. We improved it by at least 4 percentage points by simple things. And what we also did was we enabled them to grow more revenue because they're more competitive, and that grew the total top line, which drove more ultimate profit. We were the highest ROI P&L in the company. We then went and challenged internal versus resale cost and the quality. We had PCs manufactured by the company that were not competitive. The quality wasn't as good, and the price is way too high. So, with political support, I went out and we found a third-party PC that was the #1 selling PC to the government, had very high quality as measured by the government, and the cost was in line with where it should be. We were able to make money on it. Since this was our division versus manufacturing, what we really did was we forced manufacturing to fix their production cost problems to become competitive, fix their quality problems so that we could sell the manufacturing products. And we weren't trying to harm them, we were actually trying to help them, but politically that's how we had to do it. And the result was millions and millions of dollars worth of more revenue, profit, and competitiveness. Closed account sales penetration. We were selling networking solutions and found out that in large accounts, our salespeople would not sell Microsoft shrink wrap software, and Microsoft had a huge discount program if you sold it a certain way. Since our sales reps were too bothered by it, it was complicated. Required 3 signatures. Hard to fulfill. Hard to do business with Microsoft. So what I did was found out that this was allowing competition to come into the sales of our clients. So I went to manufacturing and I said, give me the responsibility for all of Microsoft. And by the way, I'm not going to add one headcount. You can take all those headcounts, put them to profit on your side, or put them somewhere else. And the revenue you had last year with $5 million, we're going to grow. So that's exactly what happened. I won't give you the details, but within a year, we went from 5 million up to 60 million, the next year 100 million, and the margin was really good. And more importantly than that, we closed the account penetration. That was of more value to the company than simply revenue and profit. And of course, I mentioned the Global Procurement Organization. That grew to be $2.5 billion worldwide, average P&L auditable savings of $70 million a year. Went from a cost center to a huge profit center. But importantly, and this is very important, we would flow those savings, these were from resale products, not internal use, flow those savings through the general manager's P&L, which meant bonus. So we weren't pulling the savings money away from the field, we were allowing the field to use it. And at the CFO level in the annual financial planning, we required each of those general managers, particularly the subsidiary general managers, to add additional contribution profit equal to the commitment in the budget. And we always overachieved those budget assignments. So we were heroes, and the general managers in those countries actually gave us more responsibility, not less. And that's the kind of cross-functional teaming I'm talking about. But that impacted revenue, profit, and competitiveness for the company. It was a win for everybody. Now notice, these are things that you probably do every day in finance. Think of your examples, your hero stories, things you enjoy doing to help the company, but think of reclassifying how they helped revenue, profit, and competitiveness, so that those around you know you're part of the central focus of the company and the CEO. In addition to that, here's what I believe is the biggest opportunity in business today, why it's the most neglected. Now, there are many exceptions to what I'm about to say, but in general, if I ask CEOs about the HR function, most of them are not satisfied with how they're helping the company. They're looking at it as administrative, as compliance-based, keeping them out of compliance audits and lawsuits. So when they do that, they say, okay, that's all I can expect from them. But HR can do a lot more than that. Unfortunately, most of them are very tactical. And there are strategic HR people out there. So if you're listening, I thank you for what you do. But from a CFO standpoint, often HR is one of those functions that is tucked underneath you. And you probably don't like to spend a lot of time with it. Why? You're results focused. HR is people focused, relationship focused. It's uncomfortable. But because of all these reasons, what happens is the opportunity in business today is this area is neglected. Let me prove that to you. If you look at the right-hand side, engagement, this is from Gallup. And Gallup says that nationwide, basically 30% of the people in a company are engaged in the business. More or less 50% are not engaged in the business. They're kind of watching the clock, trying not to get laid off. They do what they're told to do, but it's basically at best a flat ROI, whereas the engaged have a very positive ROI. And then you have this piece on the bottom, 18, 20%, it varies. But those are what's called actively disengaged. And I have a few words about them I'll show you in a minute. And the impact to the company is devastating because it is a negative ROI. Now here's the challenge. I had a CHRO tell me, Jim, I studied this in the last 20 years. The statistics haven't really changed. And my answer was, what CEO can come to the board and say, I'm going to keep revenue, profit, and competitiveness the same for the next 20 years and keep his job? What is HR doing about this? And how can you help HR to change this? We have a number of ideas. I'll mention a couple that dramatically impacts the results. But when you look at measurements, metrics, I never recommend using engagement study metrics. Why? They're not auditable. Those people who are employees can game the system. So if you have managers who tell the people, be positive in what you say in the engagement study or come have a private meeting with me in my office, you know what happens. Meanwhile, those who are very open and honest are often the ones whose results show the worst. And those who are the worst show up the best. Which means most company engagement studies show much better results than this, but it may not accurately reflect reality. However, the trend is there, the opportunity is there, how you approach it and improve it, those opportunities exist. Notice the bottom chart. Here you have traditionalists, World War II people, baby boomers and all the generations, but notice the level of engagement has gone down with every generation, which means that from a strategic standpoint, the problem is getting worse, not being kept level. And the activities, the opportunities to improve revenue, profit, and competitiveness will be damaged unless this is addressed. The flip side is, if you can dramatically improve it while your competition doesn't, you'll be way ahead of the crowd. So how are these impacting your specific company, revenue, profit, and competitiveness? And finance should be able to identify that and come up with some financial assessments and estimates of what would happen if you move the numbers on engagement the right way. Then there are other areas of HR that are easy to measure and may not be measured by anybody today, which means that it's being neglected. Remember, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If they're not measuring it, they're probably not managing it well. One is the cost of bad hires from a total cost perspective, the cost of turnover. There are many other metrics that, in my opinion, finance should be the ones doing the actual financial impact measurements for the company, which also leads to, if there is an opportunity to make an investment to fix it, you should be able to see an ROI. But only if finance can look at that and help create what that ROI would look like. So, if traditional thinking is not working, is there a better way? I call it paradigm shift strategic thinking. And it doesn't matter if it's in the financial function or the other functions throughout the company. This is tied to the strategic plan, tied to the business, but paradigm shifts means that what was done 20 years ago may not be the best today. And there may be new ideas, new concepts, new ways of looking at things that turn the light bulbs on people's thinking, and all of a sudden everything looks common sense. And that's what we try and do. So here's one example. And I'm going to use HR as an example primarily because, again, I think it's the biggest opportunity in business today. Traditionally, you look at resources and you call them employees, and call them resources, capital, expenses, expenses have feet, headcount. If you look in the dictionary and define these, you're going to find that you're generically classifying everyone as a commodity, which is disposable, fungible. You use it, you may even abuse it. But if you take a handful of grains of sand or pieces of rice, they all look the same unless you're under a microscope. And very often that's how companies treat the people. And in return, they get very frustrated. They think they're just a number. And when you lay people off, hey, they're just a number. You just eliminate large groups of people, not realizing that some of those you just let go are the ones driving the business. They're the ones creating the revenue, the profit, and competitiveness in the company. While some who are kept, maybe those who have relationships with the right people. There are ways of identifying this. So you have to look at them a little bit differently. What is that? Well, if you're paying monthly salaries and benefits, are your people an expense or an investment? Now you can see how I'm tying this to finance too. And if investment, what is the ROI and increasing value of your human investments or your human investment portfolio? That would be all of the human investments together. And if an investment, how are you helping them produce a measurable ROI and increasing value to the company? Every investment should learn what is their value to the company, how are they contributing to the company by an ROI on the salaries and benefits paid to them. This is a radical departure from normal thinking. Major paradigm shift. But I think you see it's common sense. Just like your own personal financial investments. If you have a desire to grow your investment with assumptions you make and risk factors you make, you're going to select what investments you think fit your priorities and your objectives. Well, companies need to do the same thing. The investments they make in people should match what it takes to drive the business and the business objectives. And if pieces of that investment aren't performing well, what do you normally do with that stock or that bond? If it's performing, not a problem. We want more of those. If it's not performing, you look at it and say, will it perform next year? Maybe it's just an off year. We all know that different years, different types of investments do better than others. Perhaps there's a personal problem with the individual. However, if that investment, after you examine it, looks like it's not going to change or improve, what are you going to do with it? It's common sense. So, if it's an investment, shouldn't the employee, that is the investment, be accountable and responsible for the results of their own actions or their performance? And of course, it's incumbent on the company to show them how they can be successful, add an ROI, add value, but if they choose not to, well, they need to be held accountable for their decision. You didn't make their decision for them. They made their own decision. Every CEO I've talked to and asked that question to about if you invest salaries and benefits, are they expenses, are they resources, or are they investments? The answer has always been investments. In which case, what's the role finance should play in setting up the human investment portfolio policy? And I'm going to suggest to you, just like you have a financial set of policies, financial investment policy, you have governance at the board level. This is a missing piece, in my opinion, in most governance in a company. As you know, when you studied and read the reports, most fraud and most issues of risk tied to people. And yet, you don't have people metrics to make sure that you have governance on how they are supporting the business. So let me shift gears. Who sits at the biggest leadership table? Again, the CEO and the board. But you want to be part of that. But what is their focus? It's providing the leadership to make strategic business initiatives happen, which means that if you're in your silo, your function of finance, and you don't leave that silo, you're considered very important, strategically important as a function, but you're not really part of the strategic leadership part of the company driving the business. And you're not part of the leadership team that drives the business initiatives that make improvements to the business happen. Making it happen takes leadership. First you approve and get the plan approved for what the initiative should be in the company, 3 to 5, but then someone has to take leadership ownership to drive it. And that could be sales, it could be finance. I'm sure in 3 to 5, one of those should be finance. And whether finance has HR reporting to them or finance is helping HR in the initiative. Either way, I think you see with that opportunity in HR with the people that this should be seriously considered as a great opportunity and an initiative. But it takes leadership to make it happen. So how do you get there? By learning to be a leader, if you're not already, not a manager. Now, the issue here is everyone talks about leadership, and often most teachers on leadership are talking about how to manage, how to coach, how to lead an organization. But if you think about the military, you have the sergeant who's leading a squad, but you have the general who's leading the big picture. Both are important. Here I'm talking about strategic leadership that is tied to the big strategic picture of the company in that area of leadership. And if you're the CFO, that's the role the company gives you as an opportunity to do. So what is the leadership model that finance needs to make their assigned strategic business initiatives happen? Well, here's what managers do. It's very important to understand that management is critical to the tactical day-to-day operations of a business to keep it running smoothly, allowing time for leaders to lead. Because if leaders are having to dive back into the day-to-day activities, they're not going to have time to do what they need to be doing. Here's what leaders do. Let's look at the difference. A leader sells. Why? At a high level, it's not all within your function, your control. You have to work cross-functionally with people who have their own functions and responsibilities, and you have to sell them why this is the direction to go in. And you have to set the direction specifically so they understand what you're saying. Can't be generic. It has to be measured. They have to agree to it. But notice, with risk, the manager minimizes risk avoidant. A leader takes prudent risk. Every CEO knows that every business decision is also a risk decision. And so you will take certain risk, whether it's sales or other areas of negotiations, hiring people, firing people, whatever it is, you're taking risk all the time. Leaders take risk, but it's prudent risk. They look at the opportunity, the risk factor, the cost factor, and they make wise, prioritized decisions. Some decisions may be viewed by others as highly risky, but if it's been vetted, particularly with other cross-functional people, the risk really can be managed. Encourages people, has vision. If you can't look out 3 to 5 years in the future, then you can't really paint a picture of what the new change should look like. And if you're the leader, that's your responsibility. That then drives the new growth implementation plans. So what are you going to do differently to make things happen differently? You challenge the status quo. Very often the status quo doesn't want to change. But if that happens, the business won't change, which means if your competition is changing, you're going to be the one who's disintermediated or your business disrupted. Think of what's happening with Amazon doing the same thing with retail stores all over the country. And before Amazon, Walmart was doing the same thing. Was it that the old stores were bad? No. But the competition learned, grew, took advantage of new techniques, new technologies, and they simply replaced many of the old-fashioned ways of doing business. They see an opportunity. In my opinion, a leader is always looking for opportunities, knowing that 90% of them make no sense. Of the 10%, some of them make great sense, but you can't do everything at once, so let's wait and do that another year. Others may be incredibly opportunistic and you need to prioritize, and usually you don't do it with your own personal decision. You brainstorm with others to see company-wide which ones are the most important to the company, and together present them to the CEO and let him or her make the final decisions. In some cases, the opportunities are within your own function and authority, and you can take care of it and drive it and basically report on how well you're doing. You think long term, you carve out new roads, you motivate other people. Why should they want to participate? Well, motivation is critical. Breaks the rules with approval. So if a rule is X, but it's outdated or is too conservative and the business needs to do something different, again, you go cross-functionally with those who need to be part of that decision process, and you get ultimately approval for what you need to do. Same thing I did when we created up the networking business. I still had to go to the CFO, to internal audit, and to the legal team. Didn't have to go beyond that because the rules I were creating were just simply changing how we did business from a control standpoint versus the rest of the company. Has new ideas, always being innovative and creative. If innovation comes out of finance, they're going to take notice. Vote with their heart, they inspire trust. Well, finance should be trustworthy. But in leadership, it's not just fiduciary trust. It's trust that your judgments are sound and will be successful. And sometimes you'll make mistakes, but if you're doing the process of getting your peers involved, it lowers the risk for everybody. And then you do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing may be actually a little bit harmful to your finance function. For example, in supply management, I knew I had to make a major change. I inherited 750 people. I eventually let them find homes elsewhere, and I brought in 350 professionals. Radical change. No increase in SG&A. I simply, from 750 to 350, switched it around so I was able to make the changes. It was the right thing to do. Most people would say, yeah, but I shrunk my organization. Well, from an ROI standpoint, I think that's pretty good. But if you're in HR, the bigger the headcount, the bigger your salary should be, right? It's a different way of looking at things. My view is if you create the highest ROI help for the company, highest value, lowest cost, then you should be the hero, not someone who builds an empire in a bureaucracy. So what are the CEO and board approved strategic initiatives that finance can drive through leadership? And if HR reports to you, please look at HR as a huge opportunity in addition to all the other opportunities. And you have to prioritize, or certainly let the company look at them all and prioritize with you. So once you have the initiatives, what are the implementation paradigms that would excite the CEO and the board where you can demonstrate leadership? Whoever can make these things happen will earn a seat at not only the table as a influencer, not only as a trusted advisor, but as part of the leadership team helping drive the business. And the question is that, will that be you? This is from HR. It's a statement you may have seen before. But if you can get all the people in an organization, cross-functionally, rowing in the same direction, you can dominate any industry, in any market, against any competition at any time. This is fundamental to business, and yet in most businesses, this isn't happening. I encourage you to consider what role you may have to play in each of these areas to earn that strategic leadership seat at the highest strategic leadership table, not just as an influencer or trusted advisor, but as part of the leader of the company who also may have other non-financial opportunities that may help you grow to even higher aspirations in your career. If you have any questions, please contact me. My name is Jim Vilwalk. I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish you great success in your career.